In the second-floor Dutch room of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, there is a wall. On that wall hangs an ornate gilded picture frame. It is empty. Behind that frame, for almost 300 years, hung Rembrandt's Storm on the Sea of Galilee, the only seascape the master ever painted. At 1:24 in the morning, on the 18th of March, 1990, two men dressed as Boston police officers walked into that gallery, cut the canvas out of the frame, and walked out into the night. 36 years later, neither the painting nor 12 other stolen works have been recovered. The frame is still there by the terms of Isabella Stewart Gardner's will. It will hang exactly where it is forever. This is the largest property theft in human history. The estimated value of the stolen works is between $500 million and $1 billion. No painting has been recovered. No thief has been arrested. No clean lead has emerged in over a decade. And the story of what happened that night in Boston and what we know and what we still don't is one of the strangest crime stories in the art world. To understand why this heist matters so much, you have to understand the Gardner Museum itself. Isabella Stewart Gardner was born in New York in 1840. She married into Boston money. Her husband, Jack Gardner, was an heir to a shipping and mining fortune, and she spent the second half of her life building one of the most idiosyncratic personal art collections in American history. She bought through her friend and advisor Bernard Berenson, the most influential connoisseur of Italian Renaissance painting in his generation. She acquired Titian's Europa, one of the greatest paintings in any American collection. She acquired Vermeer, Botticelli, Rembrandt, Degas, Manet, Sargent, Velázquez, and rather than donate her collection to an established museum, she built her own. The Gardner Museum opened on New Year's Eve, 1903. It was a Venetian-style Palazzo Gardner had built on the Fens in Boston, with the galleries arranged on 3 floors around a central glass-roofed courtyard. Isabella Gardner installed every painting, every sculpture, every piece of furniture personally. She wrote a will stipulating that nothing in the museum could ever be moved, sold, lent, or rearranged. If a single work were removed permanently, the entire collection would, by the terms of her will, be sold off and the proceeds given to Harvard University. The will is what makes the empty frames so haunting. The Gardner cannot fill them with copies, cannot swap in other works, cannot redesign the rooms. The empty frames will hang there until the paintings come home. The 17th of March, 1990, was St. Patrick's Day in Boston. The streets were full of revelers. Police resources were stretched thin. At the museum, 2 night guards were on duty inside. The interior was protected by motion detectors and a sophisticated alarm system. The single most important security feature was the camera-monitored side entrance and the panic button under the security desk. Everything else relied on the assumption that the 2 men working that night would not let anyone in. At 1:24 in the morning, 2 men in Boston police uniforms approached the side entrance on Palace Road. They had mustaches, the older one heavier set. They told the night guard, 23-year-old Rick Abath, that they were responding to a report of a disturbance on the museum grounds. Abath let them in. He later told investigators that, in retrospect, he should have noticed the uniforms were slightly off, that the badges did not look exactly right, but at 1 in the morning on St. Patrick's night, with men in police uniforms standing in the doorway, he buzzed them through. Once inside, the men told Abath there was a warrant for his arrest. They asked him to step out from behind the security desk. They asked him to call the second guard, Randy Hastand, down from his upper floor rounds. When both guards were standing together in the basement, the 2 men handcuffed them, wrapped duct tape around their heads and faces, and chained them to pipes against opposite walls. Then they got to work. Here is the first thing that does not fit a normal professional art heist. Professional thieves who are stealing for known clients, the kind of heist where someone has commissioned a specific masterpiece, come in, take exactly what they came for, and leave. These men spent 81 minutes inside the museum. They wandered. They took works that, by any rational measure, no professional thief should take. They cut canvases out of frames with what investigators believe was a box cutter or a similar bladed tool. They smashed the glass of a display case. They left enormous masterpieces untouched on adjacent walls. Let me walk you through the inventory of stolen works, because the list itself is a clue. From the Dutch room, Rembrandt's Storm on the Sea of Galilee, 1633. The only seascape Rembrandt ever painted, roughly 5 by 4 feet, oil on canvas. Rembrandt's A Lady and Gentleman in Black, 1633, roughly the same dimensions. Rembrandt's Self-Portrait, a small etching, a postage stamp-sized print they popped out of its frame and pocketed. Vermeer's The Concert, circa 1664, roughly 28 by 24 inches, one of only 34 surviving paintings by Vermeer in the entire world. By the standard valuation of Vermeer paintings, this is probably the single most valuable item in the entire stolen group. Also from the Dutch Room, Govert Flink's landscape with an obelisk, at the time attributed to Rembrandt, but later reattributed to Flink, Rembrandt's pupil. An ancient Chinese bronze Gi wine vessel, a small but valuable bronze, and a finial, the bronze eagle ornament from the top of a Napoleonic flagstaff that stood near the Dutch Room entrance. From the short gallery on the second floor, the thieves took 5 works by Degas, small drawings and watercolor sketches. They were not Degas masterpieces. They were preparatory studies, study sheets, the kind of work a Degas collector would value, but that no major museum loan exhibition would feature. Why would professional thieves prioritize 5 small Degas studies, but leave Titian's Europa, arguably the most important Italian Renaissance painting in any American collection, hanging untouched 1 floor below? From a side gallery, they took Manet's Ches Tortoni, a portrait of a man in a top hat, small, intimate. They removed it from its frame without leaving a clear trail of where they had been. The motion detectors near Ches Tortoni did not register their movement that night. A small fact that has fueled decades of inside job speculation. Total inventory: 3 Rembrandts, 1 Vermeer, 1 Flink, 5 Degas works, 1 Manet, 1 Chinese bronze, 1 bronze finial, 13 objects, estimated worth in 2026 dollars between $500 million and $1 billion. Depending on how you value the Vermeer. The Vermeer alone on the open market would probably sell for upwards of $200 million. The FBI took over the case from the Boston police within hours. They interviewed the 2 guards exhaustively. Both were eventually cleared as suspects, though Rick Abath, the guard who buzzed the thieves in, has remained a person of significant interest for decades. The investigation has, over 36 years, pursued several major leads. Lead 1, the Boston Irish Mob. The case has long been linked to organized crime figures associated with the Winter Hill Gang, particularly the late James Whitty Bulger's network. In the early 2000s, the FBI publicly named 2 men they believed were the actual thieves, George Reisfelder and Lenny DiMuzio. Both men died in the years following the heist. Reisfelder from a drug overdose. DiMuzio shot dead in 1991. Neither could be questioned. Lead 2. The Philadelphia Mob. In 2013, the FBI publicly announced that they believed they had identified the thieves and that the stolen works had moved south from Boston into a Philadelphia-based criminal network. The Bureau also said they believed the works had been offered for sale in Philadelphia in the early 2000s, but had since gone underground again. Anthony Amore, the Gardner Museum's security director and lead investigator since 2005, has consistently focused on the Philadelphia connection. Lead 3, the Connecticut mobster Robert Gentile. In 2010, the FBI raided Gentile's house in Manchester, Connecticut. They found firearms, ammunition, and a piece of paper listing the stolen Gardner paintings with handwritten estimated black market prices next to each. Gentile maintained until his death in 2021 that he did not know where the paintings were. The FBI offered him deals. He never produced the works. Whether he did not know or whether he knew but would not say has never been established. There is also a long-standing $5 million reward for information leading to recovery, a reward the museum increased to $10 million in 2017. No one has collected. Here is what is strange about all of this. In normal art theft cases, stolen works tend to surface within 5 to 10 years, either offered for ransom, used as collateral in drug deals, recovered in raids on associated criminals, or seized by intermediaries trying to launder them. None of that has happened here. Either the works were destroyed at some point, perhaps panicked by the FBI heat, or they are being held in a private collection somewhere, or they are buried in a basement or storage unit awaiting a generational handoff. All 3 remain plausible. None is provable. We need to talk about Rick Abath. Abath was the night guard who buzzed the thieves in. He was 23 years old at the time, a part-time musician who had taken the night watch job at the Gardner to pay rent. In the years after the heist, investigators identified several details about Abath's behavior that night that they could not fully explain. One, the motion detectors recorded Abath alone, walking through the Blue Room earlier in the evening, where Ches Tortoni by Manet hung. When the thieves later took Ches Tortoni, the motion detectors did not register their presence in that room. That is unusual. It is possible the thieves came in through a different angle, or that Ches Tortoni was taken at a different time entirely. But the fact that the only documented motion detector hit near that painting on the night of the theft was Abath himself has fueled speculation. 2. Abath had, on a previous shift, opened the side door briefly to the alley, the same door through which the thieves entered. He maintained this was a routine guard procedure to test the alarm. The museum's procedures did not require it. 3. Abath's account of being handcuffed and chained in the basement contained minor inconsistencies between his original statement and subsequent retellings. None of this is proof. Abath has consistently denied any involvement, and he has never been charged. In 2015, Abath gave an extended interview to the W. Buber Boston Public Radio Investigative podcast, Last Seen. He died in 2024. The questions surrounding his role have not been answered. Let me lay out the 3 most plausible scenarios for the current whereabouts of the Gardner works. Scenario: ad destroyed. Within months of the heist, the thieves realized the works were too hot to move. They were potentially burned, dumped, or buried. The Rembrandt, the Vermeer, and the Manet, centuries, old oil paintings on canvas, could have been destroyed by a single fire by humidity, by being rolled up and stored in a damp basement until they were unrecoverable. This is the worst-case scenario, and many investigators consider it the most likely. Scenario B, held in private criminal hands, awaiting a possible deal. In this scenario, the works are still intact but have been kept by a small group of organized crime figures, perhaps as collateral, perhaps with the hope of one day negotiating a deal with the FBI or the museum. The $5 and then $10 million reward was structured specifically to make this scenario plausible, to give a current holder a way to monetize the works without facing prosecution. So far, no one has stepped forward to claim the reward. Scenario C, held in a private collection abroad. This is the cinematic scenario. The doctor, no collector, sitting in a Swiss Freeport or a Tokyo basement, gazing privately at the Vermeer. Most art crime experts consider this the least likely. The economics of private criminal collecting almost never work out. There is no market for a work that cannot be insured, displayed, or sold. The works that get stolen and end up in private hands almost always surface again within a generation. But it cannot be ruled out. Walk into the Dutch room at the Gardner Museum today. The Vermeer frame is empty. The 2 large Rembrandt frames are empty. Each one was preserved by the museum after the heist, hung back on the wall in its original spot, exactly where it had been on the night of the 17th of March, 1990. You can stand in front of them and see, in negative, the works that should be there. Isabella Stewart Gardner's will require that nothing in her museum ever change. When the thieves cut the paintings out of their frames in 1990, they left a paradox. The frames cannot be replaced. The walls cannot be recurated. The paintings are gone, but the empty frames are obligated to mark their absence for as long as the museum exists. Every year, a few thousand visitors stand in front of those frames. They are, in their way, the most powerful exhibits in the museum, the negative space where masterpieces should be. The Gardner Museum continues to operate. Anthony Amor continues to chase leads. The FBI keeps the case file open. The reward remains on the table. One day, possibly, someone will walk into a Boston field office with a Vermeer rolled up in a tube, or the works will be found in an estate sale somewhere decades after the man who hid them has died. Or the question will simply never be answered and the frames will hang empty forever. Isabella Stewart Gardner, who designed her museum to never change, may have unintentionally guaranteed that the most striking thing about it is what is no longer there.